It is October 9th, 2024, and as Israel continues its ongoing bombardment of Lebanon, there have been a number of comparisons drawn to what Israel has done in Gaza, with their targeting of schools, hospitals, homes, caravans of cars. The list goes on. Israel did it in Gaza, now they're doing it in Lebanon. But that's not just the public drawing that comparison. No, Netanyahu himself is also doing the exact same thing, as he issued a recent warning saying that Hezbollah needs to be careful or else Israel will make Lebanon, quote, like Gaza. If that's not genocidal intent out there in the public, then I don't know what is. But all of this comes as the Biden administration refuses to take any accountability whatsoever for Israel's war crimes that were carried out using bombs that were made in the USA. Instead, you have people like Matt Miller of the State Department insisting that Israel is a sovereign country. Just pay no mind to the almost $23 billion that the US sent them over the last year so that they could carry out an all-out genocide of the Palestinian people, and so that they can now expand it to target Lebanese civilians as well. We got into all of the latest here with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Saeed Arikat, a Palestinian-American journalist, Washington bureau chief for the Al-Quds daily newspaper, and adjunct professor at American University. Saeed, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm glad that I get to talk to you today because I have been watching the clips from the press conferences with the State Department spokesman, Matt Miller, this week, and I saw that you had an exchange with him in which you called out the fact that recent reports have revealed that the U.S. has given Israel nearly $23 billion in the last year, and yet the U.S. seems to have no leverage whatsoever over Israel. How do you view the way that the Biden administration is not just handling the current situation, but also handling it when people like you are calling them out and asking them why there's not more power that the U.S. should be having over Israel right now?
Yes. Well, one wonders really that if the U.S. does not have a great deal of leverage over Israel, you would think that they would, and I believe that they do. So we have seen this before, Rachel. The United States, as far back or as long far back as in the 50s, when the Eisenhower administration basically uh, pressured not only Israel, but Israel, France, and Britain to pull out of the Sinai, to pull out, to end the 1956 occupation of Sinai and so on, and stop the war. So we've seen that. We've seen it with Ronald Reagan, in 1982, when he called on Begin and he says, Menachem, you got to stop, and he stopped. We even saw it with President Biden in May of 2021, when Israel was waging one of its mini wars on Gaza. He called Netanyahu and he said, man, you ran out of runway. Those were his words. So, it's made him stop. So one, would wonder whether this is real or not. I mean, in this partnership between the United States of America and Israel, Israel is a junior partner, if it is a partner. In fact, it is a client state, much like many of the other states. So I think, and here's the sad part, is that the United States knows it has leverage, but will not exercise it. Now, I'm not saying that the Zionist lobby does not have leverage. Yes, they do. It's an election season. Yes, they do. Netanyahu may be arrogant enough to feel that I could have my way for the next few weeks and so on until the election and until there is an inauguration and so on. That is all possible. But to say that the U.S. does not have leverage over Israel, when in fact we give them that much money, you and I, we're taxpayers. I've been paying taxes in this country, oh man, for a very long time. We all do. So we are subsidizing this crime that is ongoing, and with a great deal of money. I mean, it's not. And if we really were to look at how much Israel gets, how much money it gets from the United States, the number is probably is staggering. So we have at least, the substance to exercise that leverage, and the U.S. does not want to do it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's crazy to me too to think about the fact that, if we want to talk about Israel's survival on a normal day, that's one thing, but to talk about its survival right now and its ability to carry out an all-out genocide against the Palestinian people while now openly expanding it to hit a sovereign nation that is Lebanon. And it's so interesting to me that when Miller responds to a question like yours, he goes, "Oh, well, Israel is a sovereign country," right? He
Yeah.
acts as if, "Oh, we just give them all this money. They're in charge of what they do with that money." And it's like, have they never thought about, well, maybe if we truly want Israel to stop killing so many Palestinian and Lebanese children, then maybe we should pull back on that money or put in some preconditions at the very least, or an
Exactly.
arms embargo, that sort of thing. And yet the White
Yeah.
House acts like that
Yes.
has never occurred to them. Why do you think it is that they intentionally play dumb when we all know the power that they hold? And I'm with you. I think that it's that they do not want to use it and they're specifically choosing to do so, but then they act like, oh, there's nothing we can do.
Yes, because it serves their policy, it serves their interest, because this is really U.S. policy. The United States seems to think that it can reshape the Middle East. It can, mold it to its liking. It tried many avenues in the last few years. They talked about, let's say, an Arab NATO that includes Israel. They included Israel in CENTCOM, for instance. They did a lot of things. But look, I mean, we know that the U.S. actually does not give money just for free. They have done this with Europe. They, in 1945, the Truman administration came up with something called the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan was like $40 billion for all of Europe after the war. And they said, look, we will give you all this money for reconstruction, but from now on, we decide for you. And in fact, they have been deciding for Europe ever since. So don't tell me that, with this, with Israel, that is really an extension of the United States. And I understand. I mean, it is probably the same military, the same intelligence, the same this and that, and so on. And the U.S., at least for now, it feels that this is not such a bad policy. And I'll tell you, if you allow me just 1 minute, Rachel, I want to go through the last year, for instance. The U.S., a year ago, when Israel was bombing the heck out of Gaza, before they entered, send in their ground troops, the U.S. was saying, keep doing this, but don't go in. Then they went in. Then they did this, with Rafah and with Khan Yunis. So you wonder, I mean, they said Rafah was a red line. The president of the United States himself said that on March 8th. I mean, I remember that very well. In an interview the day after his State of the Union address, he said it many times before. They kept saying we're not convinced. Then, lo and behold, when Israel went in, it was fine. And we've seen this happen with Khan Yunis. We've seen it happen time and again. We see it with all their own proposals, for instance, for a ceasefire. The president of the United States came up with a ceasefire proposal on May 31. Hamas accepted it. Then what we saw is, an Israel rejection, and the U.S. says, well, Hamas did not accept it, which in fact it did accept. Everybody knows that. And with Lebanon, they keep saying, oh, we want to de-escalate. We don't want to escalate. But then, in fact, they were escalating. They were killing people, assassinating people, and so on every day. That is escalation. They did the pager bombardment. That was escalation. Then, the assassination of Hezbollah leader and his deputy and so on. And now, we see the Israelis going. So I think that the U.S. is basically waging the larger war, the total war, as they call it, incrementally. And I'm afraid that this is probably we're headed towards a confrontation with Iran. I mean, unless Iran says, okay, we don't want to do anything, they accept whatever Israel gives them, because, it's a different ballgame. It's a different thing altogether if we go to war with Iran.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about World War III at
Mhm.
that point. And I'm with you when I look at the fact that the US keeps acting like when it comes to ceasefire talks that, oh, yeah, Israel is on board. These talks are their idea. And then you look at Israel not only not agreeing to any proposals, but like you were saying there, I mean, they come in when it comes to the talks with Hamas, and then they go and they assassinate Ismail Haniyeh. He's
Right.
literally the head of the talks on Hamas's side. And then
Exactly.
when it comes to possible negotiations with Hezbollah to scale back on the border clashes that we've seen, they go and they take out Hezbollah Secretary General Syed Hassan Nasrallah, who is the head of the talks on that side. And it's like, if you look at what Israel's actually doing, they're not showing you that they want any kind of peace. They're showing you, in fact, that if you engage in good faith talks with us, we are going to carry out these targeted assassinations and to further escalate tensions. And then the US is going to blame it on you because that's what they do every time. Anytime Israel escalates, they turn to Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and they say, hey, we really need you guys to de escalate, right? We
Right.
really need, and it's
Exactly.
I feel like sometimes I'm watching this in this bizarre world where everything is backwards. But why do you think it is that the US uses that strategy even when it's so blatantly clear that they are, saying the opposite of what is right here?
Because Israel is the omni-imperialist power in the world today. It has a very imperialist ambition. It wants to exercise its hegemony. It thinks by doing this, it does exercise its hegemony. It keeps the others at bay. It has vital interest in the region, and it thinks that it can protect that those interests through such a strategy. But we don't know how this strategy is it sound or is it going to blow up in their face? I think it's going to blow up in their face. So I mean, you mentioned a ceasefire with Hezbollah. For instance, I remember I was at the UN when the UN Security Council was meeting on the 25th of last month, and then the proposal came in, and I was at the time I was on a program, maybe a very long program, analyzing what out of the Security Council. And I remember saying, that they asked me about the proposal, the U.S. proposal, U.S. and France and the others and so on, about a 21-day ceasefire. And I said, at the time that, I fear that it is not serious. I mean, the dynamics, the body language of the U.S. in proposing this proposal is not serious. And then we saw that Israel rejected it, and then they went and assassinated Hassan Nasrallah only 2 days after that, or less than, maybe, like less than 30 hours after they assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. That is not a serious proposal, did not push for it. And yesterday, if you saw the briefing yesterday, Miller basically said that we are not for a ceasefire in Lebanon. We support Israel's incursion. We support them destroying Hamas. What we want, I'm sorry, Hezbollah. What we want to see is that for Hezbollah to lose its grip on Lebanon. That's what they call it, and so on. So we know they are not serious. We know that Israel cannot and will not be able to do anything without the U.S. I mean, let's face it. If there is a confrontation with Iran, Israel has limited power. It cannot reach, the nuclear facilities. Let's say they want to destroy the nuclear facilities in Iran. We're talking about a program that is spread over 5,000 sites. They do have some major ones like Fordo, south of Tehran, for instance, about 20 miles in the middle of the country. Or Natanz in the middle of the country also. It's very difficult to reach. For that, you need U.S. Bombers, not just any fighter jets or F-35s or F-13 and so F-15. That will not do it. You need the heavy bombers, the B-52s that will go in and day out, week after week, month after month, to basically destroy it. So this is a very long commitment, and that's what Israel wants. And whether the U.S. would go for that or not, I don't think they will, but we are close to this. We don't know what lurks in their minds and so on. And when they talk about striking oil facilities, now that's a double-edged sword, because literally, what they call them here Iran's proxies or Iran's allies, whatever you want to call them, in Yemen or elsewhere, they can also destroy the facilities. We saw that happen in 2019 when the Houthis struck Aramco, for instance, and basically paralyzed Saudi oil production for a few days and so on. So that can happen. That is going to, spike prices here in the U.S. It's going to create an economic crisis, all throughout the world. Especially, we are in the middle of an election. Let's remember that. So that is not going to be wise. So they probably are working out plans on how to strike, maybe military bases, strike some Air Force bases in Iran. And for that, you need the U.S. Now, we know they came out and they show we are angry. We're upset because Israel is not sharing with us. Baloney. Everything is coordinated with the U.S. The U.S. is a senior partner.
Oh, absolutely. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about that I wanted to get in there were comments that Netanyahu made recently, because he is talking about the fact, and I know, as we're watching Israel bomb Lebanon, there have been a lot of comparisons drawn to Gaza, right? You have Israel bombing homes, caravans of cars, schools, hospitals, and the list goes on. And it's not just us making these comparisons, because Netanyahu is literally warning that Lebanon could face destruction, quote, like Gaza. Now, to me, that has genocidal intent written all over it. But what do you make of the fact that, again, Israeli officials for the last year have been so open about what they plan to do, what they are doing when it comes to the war crimes they're committing, and yet the international community, for the most part, has just kind of stood by and said, oh, okay, we'll attempt a 21-day ceasefire and maybe get Israel to agree to that, but they're not doing anything legitimate to make them stop.
Indeed, that's a very important question. I mean, he said it yesterday. He said it on Tuesday. What was it? The 8th of October. Let's mark that down, that date. He said that. He basically threatened the Lebanese. He told them to, unless, you do this or do that and so on, we're going to turn Lebanon into Gaza. And in fact, he is turning Lebanon into Gaza. Israel has done this time and time and time again, probably dropped more bombs on Lebanon all throughout the years than any other place, except for Gaza. So I mean, they do this. They do this with complete American acquiescence, and not only acquiescence but empowerment. Remember, every bomb, every airplane, every bullet that Israel fires is an American made, paid for by the American taxpayer. So he can have all the bravado he wants to say, or he can say, I'm so macho and I can do this and so on. But in fact, it's U.S. policy. Now, what they have been doing in Gaza is basically, the basis for Israel's perception of, let's say, the Palestinians, for instance, that you cannot exist unless you eliminate the Palestinians. I mean, and they look at the U.S. as the prime example of that. The United States got rid of all natives, destroyed them, killed them, and all that stuff. So that's how he pursued the reason. They have, they see their survival through expansion. Lebanon and now is being talked about, or the south of Lebanon is being talked about by many politicians and legislators as should be part of Israel. They're striking Syria. They think that part of that, they already have part of that, which is the Golan Heights, but they probably want more. So that is a policy of aggression. That is a policy of colonialism. Israel is the last colonial expression for the West, for the United States of America, and I'm afraid that it will continue to support it. And how do we understand what Netanyahu said? He said exactly that.
Yeah, he's telling us out in public, right? He's not hiding it. I know that there's certainly a lot at stake here all around, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Saeed Arikat, a Palestinian-American journalist, Washington bureau chief for the Al-Quds daily newspaper, and adjunct professor at American University. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you very kindly for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you can also check out new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also find Sanctioned over on my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. That's where you can join the community and vote in regular polls and Q&As as well. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.